am James Snapp Jr. Today, I am reviewing the third episode of the television series Bible Secrets Revealed. This episode, called The Forbidden Scriptures, did not focus on a specific part of the Bible. Instead, it raised questions about a dozen different subjects. What standards were used to decide which books were regarded as canonical or authoritative? What about the Apocrypha? What about the Book of Enoch? What about the Gnostic texts of Nag Hammadi? And it just keeps going. But no matter what the subtopic was, the program consistently promoted two theories. First, the theory that books of the Bible were selected from a large collection of literature that taught vastly different doctrines. And second, the theory that the books of the Bible were accepted, not for theological reasons, but because of political agendas in the early church. Robert Cargill, an agnostic professor from the University of Iowa, got the discussion going when he stated that certain books of the Bible might have made it in because they had the backing of some strong, influential people. Other books may have been very true and accurate, but they may have been marginalized because they didn't have the backing of influential people. Well, that is a safe and speculative claim. No examples are given, no specific books are named, no people are listed. It's may have and might have and may have been and may have been again. Kathleen Mcgowan, another contributor to the program, was more assertive. You might have seen her already on episodes of the series Ancient Aliens. Who is Kathleen Mcgowan? She's the author of a series of novels with New Age themes. She has claimed to have received visions of Mary Magdalene. She has stated that she is descended from Jesus and Mary Magdalene. McGowan said that the agenda of the men who determined what books to consider authoritative was politics and economics. It's not spirituality. But that's still pretty vague. Where's the who, what, when, where, and how in these statements? They're nowhere. It's not until the 5th minute of the program that a specific historical claim is made about the canon of the Bible. The narrator said, until the mid-1800s, many early Bibles, even the King James Version, contained a number of books that have since been edited out. These are known as the Apocrypha. The 1611 King James Version did indeed include the books of the Apocrypha. They were placed in between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they were intended to be regarded as a resource for study, not as something to use for the determination of doctrine. Why was this not made clear in the program? Now, here is a list of the 14 books called the Apocrypha. In Roman Catholic Bibles that are intended to present the official canon, these books are formatted differently. The additions to Esther are placed at the end of Esther. The books that feature Daniel or his friends are treated as chapters of the Book of Daniel, and so forth. Roman Catholics tend to refer to these books as the Deuterocanonical books. No matter what you call them, the books of the Apocrypha that were included in the 1611 King James Bible are completely different from the books identified as the Apocrypha in this program. During Dr. Bart Ehrman's explanation of what the word Apocrypha means, the program featured a graphic that displayed the names of 10 books in English and in Greek. Here they are. Watching this program depict 10 books that were never in the King James Version, as if they were included in the King James Version, was like listening to a sports commentator refer to Peyton Manning as the quarterback of the Miami Seahawks. Why did the people responsible for Bible Secrets Reviewed tell viewers that the King James Bible contained books known as the Apocrypha, and then depict the Apocrypha as if it contains 10 books that were never in the King James Bible? If they knew what they were doing, then they were deceiving their viewers. And if they don't know what they're doing, then they don't know what they're doing. After that blunder, the narrator introduced the Book of Enoch. Now, the Book of Enoch represents some ancient traditions about Enoch, but as the narrator said, it is believed to have been written over a period of time between 300 BC and 100 AD, a long time after Enoch. The Book of Enoch was a popular book. A quotation from the opening chapter of the Book of Enoch is found in the New Testament, in the 14th and 15th verses of the Book of Jude. But this this does not require us to conclude that Jude considered every word of the Book of Enoch to be authoritative. The Hobbit is a popular book too, and some preachers have quoted from the Hobbit, but that does not mean that they consider it part of the Bible. When Peter Landfer was interviewed, he said that the canon of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, sort of closed by the end of the 1st century. As the canon of the Hebrew Bible, the Law, the Psalms, and the Prophets, was established, even some books that had been included in the Septuagint failed the test for inclusion in the Hebrew Bible. There was no political or economic agenda driving the rejection of the Book of Enoch. It was recognized as a different class of literature, a recently compiled interpretive supplement to the Book of Genesis. Before moving on, let's consider a question that was posed about how the Book of Enoch portrays the character of God. Kathleen Mcgowan said that the Book of Enoch presents a very different God than what we see in Genesis. But if that's the case, then why, along with the 20 remnants of the Book of Enoch found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are also 20 remnants of Genesis? It does not look like the people at Qumran accepted the one and rejected the other. Mcgowan and the narrator suggested that the Book of Enoch was not included in the Bible because church leaders wanted to keep their followers in line by promoting the notion of an angry and vengeful God, as in Genesis, instead of a nice, forgiving God, like in the Book of Enoch. Well, there's a huge problem with that claim. What book am I quoting here? The earth shall be completely torn apart, and all that is upon the earth shall perish, and there shall be a judgment upon everyone. The years of your destruction shall be multiplied in eternal execration, and you shall find no mercy. There shall be no salvation for all of you sinners. You shall have no peace, nor forgiveness of sin. All from the Book of Enoch. There is nothing to the idea that God never promises a judgment for sins in the Book of Enoch, and there is nothing to the idea that God in the Bible is never forgiving. And Kathleen Mcgowan's suggestions to the contrary are a complete fantasy. One more thing before moving on. In the 9th and 10th minutes of the show, as the atheist Francesca Stavrakopoulos, the jihad historian Reza Aslan, and the agnostic Bart Ehrman commented about the Book of Enoch, did you notice the pictures? These pictures were in the show. What's Ulysses doing here? Some of these images do not have anything to do with the Bible. They're pictures of scenes from Homer's Odyssey, where the character Ulysses encounters the Cyclops Polyphemus. Cue the narrator. Did Bible Secrets Revealed blatantly misrepresent scenes from Greek mythology as if they were something else? Could many other misrepresentations be found in programs from Prometheus Entertainment? The next segment focused on the Gnostic texts that were found in the 1940s in Egypt at a place called Nag Hammadi. What we have here is basically the library of a non-Christian religious group. The beliefs of the Gnostics collided with the beliefs of the early Christians at the most basic level. For example, Christians believe, and believed back then, that there is one God and that God made everything. The Gnostics believed that everything physical had been made by a deluded heavenly being who only thought that he or it was God. Christians accepted the Old Testament, the Law, the Psalms, and the Prophets. Gnostics, such as the 2nd century individual named Marcion, insisted that the God who sent Jesus was not the same God who delivered the law to Moses. When the narrator of Bible Secrets Revealed describes the Gnostics as followers of Jesus, the credibility of his script falls apart right there. The Gnostics were not Christians. The Gnostics were dualists, to whom the immaterial world was good and the material world was bad. The Gnostics believed that the God of Abraham was not the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Christians rejected Gnostic teachings because the Gnostic teachings collided with the plain teachings of the books of the New Testament. The Gnostics rejected the Judaic roots of Christianity and wanted to make it seem as if they had authority to do so. That is why, when they wrote books containing their dualistic doctrine, they gave them false titles, as if the author was Philip, or Bartholomew, or one of the other apostles or associates of Jesus. Kathleen Mcgowan stated that the Gnostics claimed to have a tradition that comes directly from Jesus. Well, yes, that is what they claimed, but they were lying. Christians responded to the Gnostic lies by developing the canon of the New Testament to say, not those Gnostic books, not the Gnostic books, but these books here in the New Testament have been faithfully handed down to us, and they contain authoritative apostolic teaching, so these are the only books we will use as a guide to our faith. It was not a question of removing books from the Bible, it was a matter of reacting against the fraud that was being perpetrated by the Gnostics. And it was not just Athanasius in the 300s who denounced the Gnostic books. Tertullian opposed the Gnostics in the late 100s, and so did Irenaeus. The narrator asked if the Gnostic books were rejected because they were hostile to the notion of an increasingly powerful and centralized Catholic Church. Well, considering that the Christian Church consistently opposed Gnosticism, even when the Church was a small and politically powerless minority, the answer is no, that is absurd. But the charge of absurdity should be reserved for the narrator's question, could the depiction of Jesus as a holy but still very mortal man be among the reasons why the Gnostic Gospels were considered so dangerous and so subversive? The script has it backwards. It was the Christians who insisted that Jesus Christ was a real person born with a physical body. The Christian Gospels say that he ate and drank and got tired and suffered and died on the cross. The Gnostics were the ones insisting that Christ was an immortal, immaterial essence that could jump from one body to another. The third segment of the program began by focusing on a fragment of a Gnostic text that has been called the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. The narrator correctly stated that the text seems to reveal astonishing details about Mary's relationship with Jesus. That is exactly how the Gnostics framed their teachings, as an attempt to give their teachings respectability. The actual amount of contact between the author of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the historical Jesus was 0. Now, Robert Cargill, referring to Mary Magdalene, claimed that in the Bible, oftentimes she's described as a prostitute. That is not true. The Bible never describes Mary Magdalene as a prostitute. Kathleen Mcgowan said that when Mary Magdalene emerges as the apostle of the apostles, this is something that overturns church tradition. But influential church writers such as Thomas Aquinas have had no problem describing Mary Magdalene as the apostle to the apostles. Mcgowan seems to be completely hoodwinked by the Gnostics' lies when she says that Mary Magdalene emerges as a successor to Jesus. She seems to have gulliblly welcomed any ancient text that can be reshaped to support her unique non-Christian beliefs. Now, several other Gnostic texts are mentioned in the program, and we could spend hours looking at each one. But when considering whether or not these books are worthwhile, let alone authoritative, the first question to ask the scholars is, was there a close historical connection between the authors of these books and the characters they mention? The answer is simply no. These books are not lost books in the New Testament, and they were never deleted from the Bible, because they were never in the Bible. The early Christians regarded most of them as the works of other religious groups, because they were the works of other religious groups. The church never regarded them as authoritative. And that's almost all there is to that. Other mistakes in that part of the program could be mentioned, but I'm going to move on to the part that focused on the idea that in Old Testament times, the pagan goddess Asherah was regarded as God's wife. This segment of the show focused on an ancient jar discovered in Egypt with an inscription that referred to Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah. Now, Yahweh is the personal name of God, and Asherah is the name of a pagan goddess. So it looks like someone regarded the God of Israel and the goddess Asherah as a divine king and queen. The narrator scriptwriter apparently concluded that because someone held this belief, it was once the belief of the authors of the Old Testament. But that is not true. The Bible states very clearly that some people in ancient Israel worshipped false deities, such as Asherah. The Old Testament prophets repeatedly instructed the people not to engage in the worship of false gods, but many people disobeyed. The book of 1 Kings tells us that golden calves were installed and maintained as shrines in the northern kingdom of Israel. 2 Kings 21:7 reports that in the southern kingdom, during the reign of Manasseh, a carved image of Asherah was set in the temple in Jerusalem. So the inscription is not telling us much that is new. The narrator suggested that the inscription means that stories of a powerful goddess sitting as an equal at God's side have been purged from the Hebrew Testament. Well, that's not just false, it's silly. It's like discovering a New England Patriots banner near Indianapolis and concluding that someone has destroyed the once abundant proof that Lucas Oil Stadium was built for the New England Patriots. The final segment of the program focused on 3 compositions that were falsely ascribed to Peter in the 100s. One is a somewhat anti-Semitic composition in which Jesus' cross not only rises out of the tomb, but also talks. Another one is a Gnostic composition that was found at Nag Hammadi. The third one, the Apocalypse of Peter, got some respect in the early church, although it was not written by Peter. It is not a Gnostic book. It's the only non-canonical composition mentioned in this entire program that ever had a slight chance of being included in the New Testament. It is a travesty that in the course of a 1-hour program, the Apocalypse of Peter was only introduced near the end, and books such as the Shepherd of Hermas, 1 Clement, and the Epistle of Barnabas were not mentioned at all. These books are actually in at least one ancient Bible or in ancient lists of Christian literature. In a serious educational program about the development of the biblical canon, these things would be mentioned. Instead, the History Channel has provided almost everything except an accurate picture of the development of the canon of the New Testament. If you want information about how the early church decided which books should be included in the New Testament due to their intrinsic authority, researcher Glenn Davis has put together an informative website on the subject at ntcanon.org. If you want a program that misrepresents church history, that ignores major aspects of the subject it claims to cover, treats Gnostic propaganda as if it's historically grounded, uses pictures of scenes from the Odyssey to illustrate a completely different book, and makes basic mistakes about the Apocrypha and other subjects, then Bible Secrets Revealed, the Forbidden Scriptures, is what you're looking for. Thank you for watching. The television program Bible Secrets Revealed, the Forbidden Scriptures was broadcast on the History Channel, copyright 2013 A&D Television Networks, LLC, all rights reserved, and was produced by Prometheus Entertainment. Its contents were cited as part of a review.